last January I was able to fulfill a dream of a lifetime, and that I'd always dreamed of sailing the Southern Ocean in the roughest seas in the world, and really sailing down and getting in the seventh continent. I'd been all over the world, but hadn't been to the what's known as God's country, the White Continent, Antarctica. So we'd planned an expedition with a team to sail a 74-foot sailboat from the southern part of Chile, past Cape Horn, down to the 500 miles of what's known as the Sea of Fear, Drake's Passage, the most dangerous, deadly piece of water in the world. 400 ships have gone down there with every man lost. And for me, the excitement of that was awesome. I mean, when we sailed past Cape Horn out of Beagle Channel, wind was blowing 50 knots. Within a matter of an hour, the seas were 30 foot high. And I mean, we're on a 74-foot sailboat and 3-day journey across 10,000 foot depth of water for the 550 miles to the Antarctic Peninsula. And I mean, it was just awesome. And then spent a few weeks down with the penguins and the sail. And this is Cape Horn there, with the penguins and the whales and the seals, and then the time came back for the journey back across Drake's Passage, the Sea of Fear. And it was the calmest the expedition leader had ever seen. He said, I have never seen it this calm. And even when it's calm and no wind, it's still 10-foot seas, because the seas are so wild and treacherous down there. And as we had sailed the 2 days back, in fact, we had every bit of canvas we could put out on a 125-foot mast, every bit of canvas we could get out. We were 150 miles south of Cape Horn, but we were under engine power because there was just not enough wind. And then at 2 in the morning, we hadn't seen darkness for 14 days, because it doesn't get dark in the Antarctic summer. Hadn't seen darkness for 14 days, but then we had 1 hour as we moved further and further north. We had 1 hour of darkness between 2 and 3 in the morning, and I was on watch, and my buddy David, the artist, David Costello, the artist, was on watch, and then another one of the captains was on watch, and there was 3 of us, everybody else asleep, when out of nowhere. And one of the things they warn you down there is everything can be perfectly calm and safe, and yet 5 minutes later, you're fighting for your lives. You can be in the greatest beauty you've ever seen and the next minute die. We were hiking one set of glaciers down there in Antarctica one day, the next team that came in behind us on the following day, hiking in our footsteps. One of the men stepped in an ice crevasse that had opened up in the few hours that had passed from our hiking the glacier, and you always follow another man's footsteps so you don't step into an ice crevasse. But a crevasse opened up, he dropped 125 feet and was killed just hours behind us hiking that very area. And so it's a place of great beauty, it's a place of great danger. And as we're working our way home, 2:30 in the morning, suddenly the wind began to rise out of nowhere. It keeled the sailboat over to the point of so much wind was in the mast, it was about to rip the mast off, and the captain screaming at us, out on the deck, we've got to take in some sail. And of course the wind's blowing sideways, sleet is pouring and pouring in, and we run out on the deck. He screams at us to get back in and get our harness on, because you don't go out on the deck in this type of weather without a safety harness. And you've got this harness you slip on, but we didn't take time to put on our Antarctic gear, and we did get our harness on. And you get your harness on, and it has a lifeline that is about a 10-foot rope that as you go out of the wheelhouse out on that deck with 20 to 30-foot waves breaking and washing over the deck, you snap your lifeline into a rope that goes all the way from the back, the stern of the boat, to the bow, and it slides with you so that if you're washed overboard, you're still tied into the vessel. Now they let you know the lifeline doesn't save your life. You die of heart attack. Because you hit the 35-degree water and you're being dragged at 10 to 12 knots behind the sailboat, and before we can ever get you back in, all the lifeline does is recover your body, all right? And so we go out on deck, and David and I we're just total greenhorns to this type of fighting for your life environment in Arctic temperatures or subarctic temperatures. And as we snapped our lifeline in, the captain screams for David to go up on the bow and get the 2 sails in on the bow. He sends me on the starboard side, right amidship, the right-hand side. He goes up, the captain, onto the main mast, and the boat's keeled over, pegged out at 45 degrees on the list meter, and so the water's washing up on the deck. I'm sitting there with 2 little pieces of wire holding me from being washed overboard, and David's up on the bow, and he hadn't been in open ocean, heavy seas before, and so you don't walk on the decks when the boat's keeled over like that. You crawl your way up there, and water's washing up over me, and we don't have our mask on, our Arctic mask, our hands, the ice is blowing into our skin and just like needles hitting you and penetrating you, and you can't even hear the captain screaming orders as we're trying to get some of the canvas in, the sail in, before the mask is broken. Finally, I was able to get enough sail in on my side that the captain yelled, "Back into the wheelhouse," and I crawled my way back in there, and then the captain came in and crawled his way back in, and then we see David up on the bow, and he had pulled in all this line from the sails, and it all got tangled up into his lifeline. And he's up there with his hands right in the very bow front of the boat, his hands on both of those little pieces of steel cable. And he's riding the bow, and you would rise up on these 20 to 30 foot seas, and then the bottom falls out, and the boat drops for about 10 to 12 feet, and you kind of rise up off the deck about 1 foot to 2 feet. And so he's just up there hanging on, and I said, "Man, he's having a time. Look at that ride he's having, you know?" And I was wondering why he didn't come back into the wheelhouse. And finally we began to realize he's in trouble. He's in trouble. And he told me the story later. David told me the story. He said, "I got up there, I got all the line in, but as the bow was going up and down, all the lifeline got tangled, and I couldn't get my lifeline untangled from everything in the knot of all that other line I brought in, and you guys went back into the warmth of the wheelhouse." And he said, "I needed somebody to help me, and you guys were gone." And he said, "All I knew was to hold on, and then my hands went numb because I didn't have my gloves on, and my hands went numb, and I knew I'm losing the ability to hold on, and I just knew I'm going to be tossed overboard." And he said, as the hypothermia and the numbness began to set in, he said, "You know, death really is not too bad." David Costello, the world-renowned artist, 58 years old, raised in such an abusive home that even though he'd spent much of his life personally as an alcoholic, got radically born again about 12 years ago, just transformed his life. But so much like me and so many others, he still lived in Num-Numville in the ability to express love to his family. He was still locked in, a man that had so many visions and paints from some of the most awesome visions and dreams that he has. Yet he knew he'd left his family hurt and wounded, and he'd done all he could do and been around us in the Father Heart message and healing message for 6-7 years, but he still seemed powerless to bring healing and restoration to his children. And he said, "My first thought is, this isn't too bad a way to die." But then he said, "I heard a voice. And the voice said, 'Live.' And I heard it again, 'Live.' And I heard it again, 'Live.' And he knew right then, I've got to choose life this moment. I know the pain that I've borne being raised in an abusive home environment, and my kids have that pain, and I don't want to leave my children carrying that pain. I'm choosing life today. I've got to find a way out of my entanglements so I can make it home and bring healing and restoration to my wife and girls." See, that's where so many people in the body of Christ live. They started out on a great adventure in God's country. But then they found themselves so locked into entanglements. They found themselves in Num-Numville, inability to move. And they're tempted to lose all hope, and they just begin to think life's just too painful to live. I just want Jesus to come back and take me home. But there's people in your life, there's family members, that God within you has empowered you to bring healing and restoration to their lives. And God's screaming out to you. He's calling to you in the midst of the greatest trial and turmoil you're in. Live. If you'll choose life this weekend, He'll begin to set you free from your entanglements. And David knew the only chance I have is to unsnap my lifeline. You see, every one of us, from the pain, the disappointments, the brokenness of our past, have put our lifeline into what we call the counterfeit affections. It's all a bunch of pee-pee is all it is. The counterfeit affections of 7 Ps, thinking somehow through performance we can get to God. Somehow through the praise of man, position, we can get to God. Thinking somehow through the passions of the flesh, whether it be food addictions, drug addictions, sexual addictions. Somehow we can find comfort there because we don't feel close to God. Through power, control over our own life and destiny. Through people thinking, oh, I just wish my husband knew the things that Jack did. I wish my husband had the encounters Jack had. That type of thinking, wives, is no different than your husband picking up a Playboy magazine and he wishing you looked like her. And we start thinking people, if they just change and be what I want them to be, would be an answer for my need. Counterfeit affection. Places. If I just had a different boss, if I just was in a different town, if I just went to a different church, places be that source, and positions. All of these things, or possessions, all of these things can be counterfeit affections. They can all be the entanglements that's God saying, if you're just willing to let go and risk unsnapping your lifeline, you'll find your way home into safe harbor. And as we were watching David, the captain and I wondered, what in the world is he doing? We saw him unsnap his lifeline. I said, he's going to jump. I know how miserable a Christian he is. He's going to jump. And the captain started panicking because he knows he's open for a lawsuit. And then David jumped. But he didn't jump overboard. He waited until the bow of the boat went up and he left the deck about a foot, and as it started going back down into the trough and hit the bottom of the trough and started coming back up, he leaped towards the stern of the boat. And we saw his lifeline then come out of that entangled knots of mess of the other lines that were there up on the bow. And as it came out, as he landed a few feet behind them, he was able to get that lifeline, reattach it to the rope that went all the way to the stern, crawled his way back to the stern of the boat, crawled into the back of the wheelhouse. I said, David, what were you doing up there? Crawled right on by us. Crawled the 4 or 5 steps down into the V-berth area where the bathrooms are at, crawled into the bathroom, and the captain and I just looked at each other. What in the world happened to him? And after about 15 minutes, David crawled out of there. He got back on his feet and he came back. David, what was going on? I could see he was overwhelmed with emotion and he couldn't even speak. I asked him several more times in the days that we went to Cape Horn and spent a few days around Cape Horn. And then as we were at the airport in Punta Arenas on the Straits of Magellan ready to fly home, and David, what was that all about? He said, it was the moment that I came for. He said, when I heard the voice live, I knew no matter how much I experienced and pain I've experienced in life, no matter how numb I feel right now, I've got to choose life to bring healing to my daughters so it doesn't go down to the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren and those yet to come. And he said, when I crawled down in the bathroom, I just needed a place away from everyone. I didn't need anybody to talk to me. He said, I crawled in a fetal position on the floor. And he said, as I crawled into that fetal position, I've heard you talk about Daddy holding you for 6, 7 years, but it never happened to me. Father God came there and took me in his arms. His father never once held or touched in a positive way by his father. And now that moment when he'd been waiting 7 years for, Father God came to David, took him in his arms and held him as a little child. He said, I just wept and wept and wept in the arms of my father. Since then, he says, talked to him a few weeks ago, he says, Jack, it's been a year and I can't stop thinking about God's country. We're scheduling to go back 2009. But he said, people say I'm different. I don't feel different. But I see the heart of the Father being restored to the children and the heart of the children to the Father. All of my friends say I'm so much softer. I'm so much kinder. My wife says I'm not the same person. He says, I can't really tell you what happened. All I know is God's breaking the curse off my family because I chose life that day. That's what this weekend's about. Letting go of the counterfeit affections in our life and risking throwing ourselves into the arms of Father's love. And so as we've got together last night, we saw how often, even for born-again, Spirit-filled Christians, we see God through the lens of our earthly fathers. But this morning, let's turn to Psalm 22:9. Because this morning's really all about where was our first contact with love. You see, some of the deepest pain we face in life is not because of what was done to us. Some of the deepest pain we face is because of what was not done for us. We learned last night of pain that came from the look from my father and the fear and intimidation. But this morning we want to see those that maybe grew up in good homes. And do you realize some of the most difficult people to get healed are those that didn't have traumatic things happen to them? But are those that some of the deepest wounds are because of what was not done for you. I was in Illinois a few years ago teaching a conference, and a husband and wife in their 30s perhaps were at the altars during ministry time crying uncontrollably. And there's 2 little boys there, maybe 3, maybe 4 years old, just holding on to Mommy, crying with Mommy. And Mommy just kept saying over and over again, I've never experienced this kind of love. I don't know how to give this love. And there was such a spirit of hopelessness on her that she just would not have the breakthrough that she longed for. And the 2 children were so compassionate, and they're holding Mommy, Mommy, it's okay, it's okay. And then the oldest of the 2 children said, Mommy, it's okay. Mommy, I'll show you how to love. And I thought, wow, that's it. You see, in 1 John 4:16, God is love. And in Genesis 1:28 and 27 and 28, you were created in God's image, both male and female, He created in His image. And if God is love and you were created in His image, every fiber of your being has been conceived by love, formed by love. And every fiber of our being, that the most natural thing on earth is receiving love and giving it away. Does a little baby have any problem with that? I mean, the life of most, not all babies, but most babies, we'll learn about one that couldn't receive love. But for most, their whole life, every moment of every day is wrapped up in experiencing love and returning it to you. And now look at us today. What happened? Where did the most natural thing on earth, intimacy, begin to go wrong? Where did the most natural thing on earth, intimacy, begin to be defiled or entangled to the point that we've moved into numville and emotionally detached and not able to receive or to give love. In Psalm 22:9, we get a little window, a little picture of it because we see where our first contact with love was. It says there, we learn to trust when upon our mother's breast. And I saw that one day and I go, wow, because I get revelations of things by thinking of its opposite. Well, if we learn to trust upon our mother's breast, what's the opposite of that? What's the opposite of trust? Fear. We're on the sea of fear because there wasn't a safe place upon mother's breast. We find ourselves entangled and in numville. But see, upon the mother's breast, we learn to trust. Trust what? Trust relationships. Trust bonding. Trust connecting. Trust living. Do you realize living every day involves trust? And we either have an attitude, life is too painful to live, I just want to go home and be with Jesus. Or we have an attitude, glory to God, no matter what the doctors say, I'm still so excited about what He's doing today. See, you either live your life as if you have a home, or you live your life as if you do not have a home. You either live your life getting up each morning, hearing the voice of the Father saying, you're the son and daughter I love and in whom my favor rests, from Mark 1:11. You get up in the morning, I woke up 6:15 this morning, and all I could do was just glory to God and just worship. You're all I need, and just laid there just worshiping and just can't wait to give His love away to another person. That's living life as if you have a home. But living life as if you don't have a home, you get up in the morning feeling like a servant or slave, wondering, what do I have to do to appease the master today? And whatever you have to do to feel good about yourselves, others will have to do to feel honored or valued by you. You see, home represents a place of safety, security, trust, rest. And we learn to trust being real. Now, how many Christians you know are real? Don't answer that. How many Christians you know that live with a life of openness, honesty, self-disclosure, nothing hidden between God, nothing hidden between me and man? So many people live their life as if they don't have a home. And see, God's calling us into a place of trust. And where did it begin to go wrong? We learn to be real and open and trusting upon our mother's breast. When my first son was born in 1979, within weeks he was in and out of the hospital with love problems. He started having seizures 1 and 2 a week and be rushed to the hospital, and just sickness just began to invade his life. And I couldn't deal with that. You know how men are. If men can't fix something, they take hammers to it. We like being in control. And I couldn't deal with this. I can deal with 20 to 30 foot seas, but I can't deal with something I can't control. So I just said, Tricia, handle it. And the sicker he got, the more I just wanted to be at sea, because I couldn't deal with this anxiety and my wife freaking out. And my wife grew up in sickness and disease. Her mother and father, both in her early teens, were diagnosed with incurable diseases and told they would be dead within years. And her father died finally at 20 years old after 8 years of hospital stays in and out every couple of months. Her mother died of kidney disease after a 10-year battle of kidney disease. Her whole life was filled with sickness, disease, and hospitals. And now the first child is carrying all of this. And every time my wife walks into a hospital, it's almost like she'd have a panic attack, being revisited from the hell she grew up in her teenage years. Yet she had a mom and dad that were loving, caring, affectionate, affirming, the greatest Christian parents anybody can have. But some of the deepest wounds we carry aren't because of what was done for us. Some of the deepest wounds we carry are because of what was not done for us. And after 2.5 years of battling with this very sick child, And even though I'd gotten saved, I was still emotionally detached. I didn't know how to be supportive to my wife. I didn't know how to be tender. I didn't know how to be gentle. The doctor tells my wife, "You're pregnant." That was not good news. My wife, who longed to have several children, who longed for a daughter, being raised with sons, and now the doctor said she's pregnant, she broke down crying immediately. She was in depression for 3 weeks, dreading the day that child would be born, because she was at a point of a mental and emotional collapse dealing with being married to me. I like to say now I've been happily married 30 years, my wife's been happily married 10. People say, "Oh, I wished our marriage was like yours." Are you willing to be like my wife and go through 20 years of being married to a man who couldn't touch your heart? And in those years, there was no ability within me to bond and connect. And so I couldn't support her in this. 3 weeks she cried. 9 months she dreaded the day this child is going to be born. And it is scientifically proven. Whatever a mom is experiencing emotionally, when she's carrying the child, those emotions will be imparted to the child in the womb. Dr. Thomas Verney's book, The Hidden Secrets of an Unborn Child, gives you scientific studies done in universities around the world that's proven this. When Sarah was due to be born and in the hospital and Tricia in labor, after 18 hours, the doctor came out and said to me, "I don't know what the problem is, but it's like this child doesn't want to be born." Would you want to be born if you weren't invited to life? Would you want to be born and if something in the mother had dreaded the day that you would come into this world? After 19 hours, Tricia began to go into convulsions. Her heart rate just skyrocketed. They thought she was about to have a stroke or a heart attack, had to do an emergency C-section. She was still in the convulsions, delivered Sarah out of this. It was 5 hours before they stabilized Tricia, my wife, and could ever bring Sarah in and lay Sarah upon Mama's breast. And as they brought Sarah in, laid Sarah upon Mama's breast, Mom looked in the eyes of Sarah, and I mean her heart just exploded with love for this child. And my wife is a nurturer because she was raised with so much expressions of love around her. She's got huge amounts to give, and she's got a wonderful, awesome mother's heart, nurturing heart. But she went right into postnatal suicidal depression. In 1981, it hadn't been scientifically proven. The doctors said she's going crazy. It was a chemical imbalance within her body. 1 out of 10 women experience postnatal depression after the birth of a child. 1 out of those 10 will end up in psychiatric hospitals for this. And we've seen on TV in the last year what mothers can do to their children during seasons of postnatal depression. And Mom was hollow. She went from this outgoing, lively, bubbly person to it was like nobody was home. She just existed for the next year. She just functioned for the next year. She couldn't give milk. She had a child, seizures every couple of days. She couldn't leave Micah's presence for one moment. She would have given her life for either of their children, but some of the deepest wounds aren't because of what was done to you. Some of the deepest wounds are because of what was not done for you. And Sarah didn't want to be held. Sarah was the perfect child that didn't need any of Mom's attention. And in the emotional crisis she was in, it was great that Mom could put all of her time into Micah, the sick child, and didn't have to put much time into Sarah. Sarah was raised in a child care center because Mom could barely function taking care of one, so it was best to put Sarah into a child care center for the first 8 to 10 hours of every day. And Sarah, whenever she cried, it was only because she wanted a diaper changed or she wanted a bottle, but she didn't want to be held when she was fed. She wanted to be propped up. And it was great at first that she didn't need time or attention, but when Sarah started getting old enough to crawl and to walk, she became the world champion child care center biter, kicker. She could outfight, outbite, outkick, outsnatch hair. I mean, 1.5 years old, she terrorized every child care center. They'd kick her out of one to another. They said she's completely defiant, antisocial, independent. She will hurt any child in the room. She had no ability to smile. She's full of anger. You find an angry person. That person is angry because they've not been given the love that God created for them to receive, whether they're 2 years old or whether they're 60 years old. When they cut you off in traffic and screaming and yelling at you, I just sit there. I know what their childhood was like. I'm not going to be offended by that. And see, Mom's completely healed at 1 year old. Sarah was about a year old at the postnatal depression. The life returns into her. She starts trying to restore life into Sarah. But the question now is, could Sarah receive Mom's love? Yeah. By the time Sarah's 2 years old, we're in Bible school. Micah has the worst seizure of all. He's in the child care center at the Bible school. We had to grab him, rush him to the hospital. The entire Bible school shuts down to pray as we're rushing him to the hospital. He turns blue and that he hadn't breathed in almost 4 minutes. We pull just outside. The hospital was around the corner into the hospital. He takes a gulp of air, never had another seizure again, completely healed. So now Mom can start putting her time and her energy into Sarah. But could Sarah receive Mom's love? You see, a mother's love is what sets into motion our ability to receive. A mother's love is about the ability to receive nurture, comfort, empathy. A mother's love builds in us a belief system of expectancy that if I'm hurting or I'm in need, someone's going to run to me to meet my need. Because what's a mother's love all about? Discovering that child's need and then moving all heaven and earth to meet the need of that child. Any cries, any discomfort in that baby, Mom starts moving on behalf of that child. And see, by the time Sarah's 9 years old, she's the most angry, defiant, independent, self-willed child. No ability to bond with anybody else. She's the bully of every classroom. She would not feel pain. She had not one close friend. No one would talk to her. She lived in a room in books. She lived in a dream world, in a fantasy world, smart as could be, straight A's, graduating college at the top of her class in May, or in the top 2, I believe it is, in May. And her whole mind and her whole existence was operating from the intellect, but no ability to operate relationally. We learned to trust upon our mother's breast. And it was not a matter of Sarah being loved or not. Sarah was loved. But Sarah hadn't received the right kind of love in the formative years. In the first 2 years of life, 9 months in the womb, first 2 years of life, psychiatrists believe now we know whether a person will battle depression before they're 2 years old by how much they have bonded to an earthly mother. And the mother relationship is the first 2 years of life. The father relationship, the most significant years, is the 3rd, 4th, and 5th year, where the child is learning identity and a sense of significance and importance. But the whole thing of the ability to open our heart and receive love has been seeded in us before we're 2 years old. And then when Sarah was 9, we began to learn many of these principles. And I asked God we'd put her through every type of counselor, deliverance, doing deliverance on her in the night, family counselors. We could not break through this anger that she just lived with and this closeness about her life, and totally antisocial, wouldn't receive Mom's love, wouldn't receive my love. Mom overcompensated, tried to pour it into Sarah, but Sarah's receiver was broken. And many people are relationally handicapped because they did not receive the right kind of love in the primary years. Doesn't mean they weren't loved. Sarah was loved. But Mom was dealing with her own emotional crisis. She was dealing with being married to me. She was dealing with the sickness of a child. She was dealing with postnatal depression. And she lacked the ability to give Sarah what she needed. And then as we learned this, I felt like God gave me a plan. And it was June 14th, 1991. My daughter, 9 years old, that we sat down with Sarah. And we took 1 hour to sit down with her. She sat in that chair, the angriest little girl you'd ever seen, and she came out of the chair. She's 24 years old now, and she's still bouncing off the walls. Her personality was so transformed. 3 hours later, our neighbors came over knocking on the door and said, "We want to know what has happened to your daughter." I said, "What do you mean?" "She's usually outside beating them up. She's playing and laughing with our kids instead of beating our kids up. Teachers sent notes home. What has happened to your daughter? She doesn't sit in a corner alone. She's playing with other kids now. She's laughing. She's smiling. People at church, what has happened to your daughter?" Because her whole countenance went from. Now, it's been a journey of 15 years in her life. But it was a turning point, and many are saying, "That's my daughter, that's my son." And whether they're 5 years old or whether they're 50-year-old children, we teach what we did on that time on healing the heart of the family. Can't go through all of that. It takes us almost 2 hours to run through what God showed us. And people have walked through this with their families all over the world and seen their children change. It doesn't make any difference. You don't even have to use the name Jesus. If they're not saved, you can still do this and see your family healed and restored from the pain of not learning to bond with mothers or fathers in the primary years of their life. But see, we said that many people are relationally handicapped because they've not received the right kind of love. What's the right kind of love? The Greeks call the word storge, S-T-O-R-G-E. That when they were looking for a word for family love, they saw that the most nurturing, loving, tender, caring animal in Europe was the stork. After all, who delivers babies? And as they watched the stork, and it's amazing to watch them when you're in Central Europe, they are so loving and touching and nurturing that as you see them build their nest up on the top of chimneys and high places there, you see so much interaction of affection and touch. And even when it's time to fly the 1,000 miles north for the summer and migrate to the north, the older storks can't make the journey. So the younger storks, once the older storks dive off of the chimney and begin to soar, the younger storks will come underneath them and put their wings underneath them and carry them the 1,000 miles through the air to the north. Because see, a mother's love is all about, storge love is all about 3 primary characteristics. No certain order to them, but 1, large amounts of affectionate touch. 2, loving, tender eye contact. What did we learn last night? We learned Proverbs 18:8, the wounds that can go down to the innermost parts of the soul from tone of voice is the 3rd, tone of voice and eye contact. And see, storge love is administered through large amounts of affectionate touch, loving eye contact, and tender, gentle tones of voice. And storge love's not just for the human kingdom. It's all in the animal kingdom. And who's the primary giver of storge love, of nurture, of compassion, of empathy? Storge is about protection. It's about feeding. And the word nurture means to cause something to come forth. It's storge love that causes something to come forth. The ability to have healthy relationships. And see, the lioness with her cubs, she uses her tone of her growl, she uses her eye contact with her cubs, she uses body contact to nurture and raise that child, but it's the same with us. God has created us. The most natural thing on earth is experiencing storge love. It is an absolute essential to our life, we're going to see here. An absolute essential. And if love is not natural for you, if experiencing God's love and giving it away is not natural towards you, you're going to need drugs. If living your life to experience love and to give it away isn't natural to you, you're going to need pornography, a false sense of intimacy. If living to receive love and give it away isn't comfortable for you and you're a Christian, you're going to need a ministry. So you think you can impress people, pat yourself on the back, and impress God. And some of the hardest workers in the body of Christ have no ability to have healthy relationships in their homes. It's a counterfeit affection. They're on the bow in entanglements. And see, they think others are the problem because they may not have had deep trauma. Some of the deepest wounds we face are not because of what was done to us. Some of the deepest wounds we deal with in life are because of the lack of large amounts of storge love being expressed to us. And see, storge love is all about affection. It's scientifically proven. If you are not touched in a healthy way at least 13 times a day, your skin begins to wither up and dry up. My wife all the time comes now that we're over 50. Touch me, touch me. I've never been touched enough today. There's something about the power of touch. And it doesn't even have to be in the human kingdom. It's a law of creation that is created in the image of God's love. What's the healthiest thing you can do for nursing home patients? A pet. A nursing home pet. Where there's a nursing home pet, a dog, that dogs just live to be in your presence. Where there's a dog that goes room to room and the nursing home patients handle and hold that dog and pet that dog, they're healthier, they're more alert, they're more alive. My mother was dying last summer of a cancer that began in her inner parts and spread all over her body, and it was a horrendous 6-week battle. She was pronounced with it in 1st of June and gone by the end of July. And as the cancer had entered her brain, she's laying in the bed, 88 years old, just groaning and groaning from the pain of this. And the morphine wouldn't hardly cut the pain that they had her in. And well, we've got a little 9-year-old male black Chinese pug that has ADD. Affection deficit disorder. It must be touched at all times. If you come into my house, I warn you, do not reach down and touch him, or he is all over you from then on. I mean, he has to be touched. He has to be laying up against your foot. He just loves affection. He takes after my wife. And so my mother would be laying there groaning in agony, and we'd take a little Teddy and we'd put Teddy up on her chest. And she'd just wrap her arms around and stop groaning and just a smile come. My mother, who hadn't been touched in healthy ways for 40 years because of the pain she grew up in and the divorce. But the power of even an animal's touch produces life. And after about an hour, Teddy would jump down and get down, and within 5 minutes, she's back to groaning. We put Teddy back up there, she's back in peace. It's the power of affectionate touch. And see, you can go to discoveryhealth.com and you can look up the scientific studies that show if you did not have large amounts of affectionate touch in your childhood years, by the time you reach your 40s and 50s, arthritis, cancer, heart disease, life-threatening diseases begin to invade your body because of the need for large amounts of affectionate touch. It's part of storge love. It's an absolute essential for our life. It is a need we must have. Now catch this one. A need is something, if unmet, makes a person sick. But a need, when met, makes a person well. And once you're well, you can now help meet another person's need. I'm going to repeat that. It's so crucial to where we're going. A need is something that, if unmet, makes a person sick. But if met, makes a person well, makes a person sick. When there is the lack of storge love expressed in your life, it affects your physical health. It affects your emotions. World War II London, the bombings of World War II, 50,000 killed, 250,000 injured, as the German bombers came over and trying to destroy the English cities. Many people were found in the rubble, babies found in the rubble, and not knowing whose children they were. And there was one particular hospital that the children would be taken to, and the babies, that they couldn't find the parents. The parents were dead, killed in the bombings. They began to find 90% mortality rate with these babies. 90% of these babies died, but they didn't have life-threatening injuries. And they couldn't understand why these babies were dying. And so they did a study of what was happening to the babies in this hospital. And in the study, because there were so many injured in the hospitals, there were so many nurses were so busy, they couldn't find the aunts or uncles or parents of these babies. These babies weren't held. They were fed, their wounds were taken care of, their diapers were changed. Yet within months, 9 out of 10 babies would die, and the study showed, because of the lack of affectionate touch. An absolute essential of our life and a need unmet. Something begins to shut down physically and emotionally. It's the power of a mother's love. We learn to trust upon our mother's breast. And see, in Luke 11:34, it speaks about that the eyes are kind of the lens of the soul. The eyes are a gateway that helps develop our mind, our will, and emotions. 83% of everything we learn comes through the gateway of the eye gate. And see, a baby doesn't know how to communicate with you and doesn't understand your words, but a baby understands body language and tone. We said last night, 93% of communication is not words. 7% of communication is words. 35% is tone of voice. 58% is body language. So a child is already developing all of its knowledge about life and living and trusting just through the eye gate and the ear gate. Now, before I had a revelation of love 10 years ago, my wife and I would be at the mall, and I was a pastor or on staff in a church, and she'd see somebody that she knew that had a new baby going down the mall in the carriage, and my wife would drag me over to go, oh, we got to go over and see this baby. And I don't want to go see this baby because it happens every time when I look at babies. My wife drags me over there, and she sticks my head in that carriage, and the baby looks at my wife and just, and then the baby looks at me. Because the baby looked at me and sees a man completely emotionally detached that lives completely out of mind and no ability to bond and connect. Because a baby operates from eye contact and tone of voice. But it's interesting the change we saw when I had a revelation of God's love and God began to open up the frozen areas of my life. That I can go to a baby now and they're just drawn to me. Animals hated me. Children hated me before because I don't do animals, I don't do children when you're emotionally detached. But then when God's love begins to open you up, you start finding. Now, Trisha's amazed how children are just drawn to me. I still freak out, but she said, there's something different, so different about you. We're in Beijing, China, and Jean and Doug Jones are with us, and Jean's here, one of our team members, and as we're ministering to the international community there on the Father's Love. There was an Oriental couple that were there, and they had a baby about 6 months old that just wouldn't stop crying. In Oriental culture, you don't do anything to bring attention to yourself in public. So they were so frustrated with their baby and trying to stop their baby from crying. And the more frustrated and upset they got with the baby, the more the baby what? Cried. And the more the baby cried, the more mom and dad are giving the baby the signal, the look, and the tone, and the more the baby cried. So they got up to leave, and Jean's husband, Doug, I mean, he looked like Grizzly Adams and had the beard and big old guy, you know. I mean, he follows them out in the hallway and said, "No, don't leave, don't leave." They said, "No, our baby won't stop crying." He says, "I know, and I know why. Let me hold the baby." And they said, "Our baby doesn't let anybody go near them." Of course. We learn to trust upon our mother's breast. And when you find a child that is terrified of people, oh, they never learn to trust upon mother's breast. It immediately tells me the home life. If that child is fearful of other human beings. Because the most natural thing on earth is receiving love and giving it away and bonding and connecting and being real and being open. And if it's not natural to you, you're going to need mint chocolate chip ice cream. You're going to need a ministry. You're going to need a mistress. You're going to need drugs. You're going to need a job to where you can try to find security through possessions. And Doug got on in the face of the little child and starts talking baby language. Good. Yeah, I wish I had a picture of that. And he just starts smiling at the child, and just through body language and through tone of voice, just kept speaking love into this fearful little child. And then the baby reached up and crawled up into Doug's arms. The parents were shocked. They came back into the meeting, and Doug just kept speaking life and love and acceptance and belonging in the child. And the couple came back 4 nights in a row for 2 hours rest every night. Because Doug would hold the child. And see, Storge love is all about this body language that goes forth from our life. And see, when Storge love didn't flow in a healthy way in our childhood, then other issues begin to rise up in our life. 1 day old male children lay in the crib like this. Because masculinity is about doing and creating and building, and they're just sitting there. Somebody give me a golf club, a fishing rod. I mean, let's go do something. 1 day old female babies are totally different. 1 day old female babies, their hands and their body language is at rest. Because femininity is all about rest and bonding and connecting. The only thing moving on a female baby is their mouth. Nurse, get in here and talk to me for a while. I haven't spoken my 25,000 words yet today. Let's bond. Let's connect for a little while. 1 day old male and female babies both abandoned at birth do something totally different. 1 day old male and female babies that have been abandoned play with their genitals. Because even the first day of life, if we didn't learn to trust upon our mother's breast, pain starts seeking pleasure to comfort and to medicate the feeling that we don't have a home, a safe and secure place in a father's heart. And Storge love is foundational to what we call eros love, today defined as sexual drives and attractions.